Hi, welcome back to the Millennium Review.
I'm Sophie.
And I'm Belle.
And we have a few announcements for you before the episode starts. We're going to start with the Cuz Review. They have applications to join the Spring 2024 staff open, and the deadline to apply is January the 5th. If you go to their Instagram, they should have a link in their bio.
And the Southeast Review's 2023 Literature and Visual Arts Contest has extended their submission deadlines. So the new deadline is Sunday, December 31st. Winners will be published, and they'll also get a $750 prize. So give it a shot. Turn in any poetry, fiction, nonfiction that you have.
And happy final season, everyone.
Good luck.
Hello.
Hi.
We're here with Jannah Mitchell. She teaches our Afro-Futurism literature class that we're taking this semester. We're really excited to have you here.
Thank y'all. I'm so excited to be here.
So, firstly, we just wanted to talk about what Afro-Futurism is. I know I didn't really have an idea of that before we took this course.
Right. So I think the best way to sort of describe Afro-Futurism is that it's an intersection of fantasy, space, sci-fi. It's I think I called it sci-fi, fantasy, and speculative fiction, an intersection of all of those things with sort of an undercurrent of themes and discussions about the African diaspora, themes of liberation, those sorts of things. So that's basically the basic definition of what Afrofuturism is.
And you're currently a student in the PhD program. Mm-hmm. You're in your 5th year here at FSU?
My 4th.
4th.
Yeah.
And how's that been going?
It's been going really good. I just finished, this year I finished my, what is it called? My preliminary exam. So that's the exam that doctoral students have to take to make sure that they know the field that they're emerging into. And then I just defended my prospectus, which is basically a proposal for my dissertation. I actually defended that this past Wednesday.
Wow, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. So it was very nerve-wracking, but also really exciting at the same time.
So are you teaching the same type of courses next semester? Do you know what you're teaching yet?
Yeah, I'm teaching. So all English PhD students teach the freshman composition ENC 2135. So I'll be teaching that. And then I'll also be teaching our class, the class that you guys are taking right now, again, which is Women in Literature with a special focus on Afrofuturism. So I'll be teaching that in the spring.
I definitely recommend the class for anyone who needs that literature credit. I know Sophie and I we're both English majors, so we were kind of looking. There's so many different literature courses offered, and each one has a specific focus. And I think that this has just been so different from any literature course that I've really taken before, because you still have that theme of women in literature, so there's a lot of feminism, narrative, and rhetoric, but there's still this broader genre, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
So it's been really interesting.
That's what I tried to do. I wanted it to still be able to talk about women in literature, right? Because that's the course. But I thought it would be interesting to sort of showcase the trajectory of Black women in the science fiction field. Because I think the science fiction field is not very much women dominated. It's very much a male dominated space. And when I first got into Afrofuturism, everyone would always say, well, what does Black people have to do with science fiction? Which is just the wildest question to me, when there's just this entire field of Black folks in science fiction and fantasy. And so I wanted to showcase that in a way that was, I don't know, sort of different, because I don't think many people engage in Afrofuturism, you know?
Yeah, I was gonna ask you, like you said, focusing on women in Afrofuturism, was it hard for you to build that list of books that we were gonna read or anything? Because I know it is a male-dominated field.
No, actually, I think Black women, I don't know if this is controversial, but I think Black women dominate Afrofuturism.
Yeah.
Which is interesting, because it's completely different than what you would have for the sort of traditional science fiction genre. But no, I didn't have any trouble at all making the books. I actually had to narrow down what I wanted us to read. Yeah.
Have you thought of anything you're going to change for the like course schedule next semester? Is there any specific book that you're interested in bringing in?
Actually, in our class tomorrow, I'm going to ask y'all what y'all think that I should do, because I really value student feedback, because like y'all are the ones that are learning and taking this for your degree, so I want to make sure that the classes that I'm teaching, that my students feel that they're beneficial, and that I can continue to build off of something. This is the first time that I'm teaching women in lit this fall, right? It's the first time that I've taught women in lit, and the first time that I've taught it like this. So I continue to build each of the classes that I take with my students, so that y'all can tell me what worked, what didn't, what books you liked, which ones you didn't like. Like, I'm going to ask y'all, if you could take one book off the list that we've read, which one would it be? And which book would you keep?
So I have an idea for this.
Okay.
We have talked a lot about Octavia Butler, which I didn't know Octavia Butler until we started the class, which is kind of insane, like, the more I think about it. So we started, the schedule has been really interesting, how you've done the readings, as we kind of like have seen the evolution of this genre.
Right.
Octavia Butler, for those of you who don't know, like I didn't, she is kind of created everything. And so we started with her book Kindred, which I really enjoyed. It's a time travel, like historical fiction, sci-fi book. And I think that it would be really interesting to read her Parable of the Sower.
Yeah, we talked about that a lot in class, and now I'm interested in it.
We did. I thought about that. The reason why I chose Kindred was because that is, like you said, one of the first.
Yes.
And then it's also her most popular, I would argue. I think Kindred is more popular than Parable of the Sower. And so I was trying, I mentioned in our class that I was trying to create sort of like the evolution of Afro-Futurism, and to me you started with Kindred, but I had so much trouble deciding between Kindred and Parable of the Sower, because Parable of the Sower is so good, and it's also a hard text to start the semester out with. Like it really, I think in class I could say that the 5th season really hit us hard, and that's Parable of the Sower. And I tried to have like that really hard-hitting novel in November, right? Because we're sort of all getting a little tired, and we're getting towards finals, so I try to get something that really is like, oh my God, this is just amazing, and that's Parable of the Sower. So I don't know how I would feel starting the semester out with that, but maybe I might. We'll see.
I don't know. I'm definitely not saying to get rid of Kindred, because I think like
Kindred is a really good book to start us off.
Yeah. It was a great Kickstarter, and I also think that Octavia Butler, we did read a short story of hers too.
Bloodchild,
got a little wild. Yeah. Bloodchild got a little crazy.
Bloodchild is most of Octavia Butler's work is really weird, but in such a great way.
It's so good, bold, and it really makes you see like what better way is there to carve out this space, because that's really what her work had to do, was establish and push other men out of the way to create this genre. And I think that Octavia Butler, she might have gotten a little crazy on us with Bloodchild, but she did a great job of establishing something that didn't exist.
She did, and I think each of the authors that we've read after Butler do the same thing. Like, they continue to carve out that space, but Butler is the person who, I don't know, like, gives everybody else the courage to sort of do that, you know? Because the last book that we're reading, The Deep, by River Solomon notes that Octavia Butler is a literary influence for them. And I think that's, I mentioned it in class, I think that's such a pertinent way to end the class, is to see just how much Butler influenced the other authors that we're reading throughout the course.
I also love that you've brought in music, and we also watched a movie for the course, and I think that looking at literature is not necessarily just a book is interesting to do, because I feel like a lot of the times in my courses, like, we just talk about like, the classics and stuff, but I've had some professors this semester, like, you give us songs or like playlists to go with the books, and I think that's like, it's just such a good way to immerse yourself into it, especially when we listen to The Deep and then we're reading that right afterwards. It's so well done.
But Afro-Futurism itself, right, is not just literature, but also movies and art. I wish I had incorporated more art in the class. But movies, art, music, And we've talked a lot about whether Afro-Futurism is a critical theory or just an aesthetic, or how it's both. And so I really wanted to incorporate that because I think it gives a sort of well-rounded view of what Afro-Futurism can be. And I also think, like, the literature major for the English department is lit media and culture, right? And so when I was taking my coursework for the doctoral program, we also focused a lot on movies and art and music, and focused really heavily on that media and culture aspect of the major, which I think is really important because, and we mentioned this in our last conversation in class about fan fiction and inspired work, which was just amazing. But so much of the way we engage with literature is heavily dependent on the culture that we're living in, the time in which the works are being written, and then those things also influence other media, whether that's art, music, or television, So I think all of those things are really intertwined.
Right.
I agree. And I think one of my favorite things pieces of media that we looked at this semester was the movie that we watched and then talked about in class, Who Cloned Tyrone.
Yeah.
That was so good. Yeah. And honestly, I've never been really big in like the sci-fi genre, so I was a little skeptical, like when we first put it on, but it was Sophie and I both ended up really
together.
invested in the movie.
Yeah.
And like, he did what? Wait, who's that?
Mm-hmm. And the funny thing is, I told y'all in class, I watched that for the first time while I was getting my hair done.
Yes, yeah.
I think that's so interesting that, like, I was able to incorporate that in the class, and I don't think I go get my hair done this week. And I can't wait to tell my loctician how much y'all enjoyed the movie.
Yeah.
I don't think I've met with her since then, but anyway, that's a tangent. But I also think that's important from the work that I do in class, is that things that I interact with in my daily life always make it into the class some kind of way. And it's always just really cool to see how my students can engage with those sort of things, and what kind of narrative that I can create, because They Cloned Tyrone, right, this is a women in literature class, and They Cloned Tyrone isn't directed or wasn't written by a woman. But there's the main character who I am blanking on her name.
I'm trying to remember right now too. I can't. Yo-Yo, yeah.
I chose that movie for us to watch because of Yo-Yo, because she really, like, I don't want to spoil the movie, but when things are really, like, at its worst, Yo-Yo is like, I am not giving up.
Yeah, she pushes everyone else.
She continues to push, and so I thought that was just so prolific and really reminiscent of the other main characters that we were engaging with for the semester, and also the authors that we were engaging with for the semester as well.
Yeah. I think that bringing in stuff from, like, your life that you enjoy too makes it a better course. Like, all of the teachers and professors that I've had that I've really loved learning with, they're passionate about what they're teaching, and clearly you like what you've been talking about. I just think that's such a good thing to incorporate into the classroom.
I try. I do really try.
I know the students appreciate it. Like, I know we all love it.
Well, I really appreciate that, because, like I said, I don't, my lesson plans aren't, like, they're always really intentional. Sometimes I'm 30 minutes out of our class, and I'm like, I think I'm going to change what I had my plan, and then I come in and we do something different. And I also think that y'all can see that when I'm trying to ask questions and be really considerate about, like, what I'm pulling from the narrative to ask y'all. So, I don't know, it's definitely a very interesting game when it comes to lesson planning and making sure that, like, I'm trying to take all that I can out of the narrative, because the semester is so short. Yeah. And we don't have as much time as I would like to focus on the novels. Like, there's so much in Kindred that we didn't get a chance to talk about. But I have to be really strategic again about, like, what I want to focus on for that day to make sure that y'all get a well-rounded sort of understanding of each narrative. Which is where the presentations come into play. Like, the reason why I incorporated the presentations is because I wanted y'all to get a chance to engage with scholarly criticism, and also be able to engage with different takes on the narratives as well.
Right.
Something that was other than what we've done, because sometimes I think we can get on a tangent about certain things.
Yeah.
And each time we come back in class, we're talking about the same thing. So the presentations and the scholarly articles are there to kind of help y'all think a little bit deeper, I guess, about the text in different ways.
I love that you've included the scholarly articles because I know when we did our presentation on Kindred, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yep.
And we read the articles, we were sitting in the study room like, guys, you have to hear this, like talking about quotes from it.
Like, who highlighted that? Somebody highlighted that quote, right?
Y'all, I was going to say, y'all ate that up.
Thank
Y'all's presentation was so good.
We were so excited.
We were like
to do that.
into it. We were fired up
We
about it.
almost pulled an all-nighter before that presentation.
It was so good. And I think that's one thing that I'm not taking the presentations out, but I think I'm gonna for next semester do an entire day, like instead of, because we separated our class with presentations and then like sort of an ending talk. I think I'm gonna have one day for presentation so that I can really give everybody a chance to sort of talk about their thoughts and stuff and not have to restrict.
One thing I will say that I loved about this class, and I think it even got to the point where we kind of have to like call it sometimes, is our discussions. And of course, this has to do with the group of people that you're with and like how the class functions, because I've taken a lot of literature classes. We've taken a lot of literature classes. And you can't always say, like, some people might be more excited to talk about certain genres or whatnot. But I think every class we've had this semester, the discussions have just been amazing. And I think it's because the way that you've constructed the course is it's just so open to interpretation. And there's been times where we've read the same passage and we've been really divided on like how we felt about a character or something that happened or how we felt that the setting played in. So I think that has just really made it even more like exciting, like going to class and having one perspective and leaving with a totally different one.
I also think that like speaks to Afro-Futurism as a genre too, because like there's just so much to talk about within it, and like it like touches on so many points, and it's just such a good conversation starter, and it's interesting, and more people should know about it as a genre, because I literally had no idea before we had signed up for class. And
it's funny because, Sophia, you were in my class last semester, and that class was so different than this class, and I didn't have I did have creative freedom when it came to our class from the spring, but I had more of a strict sort of curriculum that I had to follow, so it was a little bit different.
You still made it fun though.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Y'all, I don't know, I am partial. I have the best students, I think. But I think what Belle, something you said made me realize that like as I'm crafting the class, and I don't think many people think of this when they get doctorate degrees or master's degrees, is thinking about what type of instructor you want to be. And like Sophia, you mentioned classes when you are talking about classics and stuff like that. I think there are many ways that someone could have taught a women in literature class. And sometimes I wonder if I give too much free reign, but I thought about the type of professor I wanted to be, and I don't want to be the type of person or the type of professor who, I don't know, it's really strict and rigid. I like my classes to have sort of like a flow where we could all come and like experience our ideas. And I actually had one of my professors who's on my dissertation committee tell me, like, I took a class with him, and he said that we're all learning together, and that just because he might say something doesn't mean that that's everything or that's like the end all be all of something, right? There's so much that I can teach my students and my students can teach me, so I always go into the classroom like that. And I think, I don't know, this is also a tangent, but I feel like each literature class is different. Like there are some professors who need to be strict and sort of rigid, and then there are some classes that can have a little bit more flow. And as I've like continued to go throughout my doctorate career, I realized that I wanted to be the type of professor who had a little bit more of a flow to the class, where we can kind of all come in and bring our ideas together while also still keeping with the genre of Afro-Futurism, if that makes sense. Sort of still being able to teach about what that genre is, the important themes that you see within it, but still, again, having like a class that we can just talk about whatever.
Yeah.
Is there a specific book or like piece of media that you would recommend to someone who's never like delved into Afro-Futurism?
I think it would actually be Kindred.
Yeah.
I think so. Just because I think it, and I don't know, y'all might be able to attest to this, is an easy text to get into.
Yeah.
It's one of Butler's first works, so it's not super heavy on world building and stuff, but still you can get those central themes of Afrofuturism within the text. So I think it would probably be Kindred. And then maybe for a movie, I actually think The Wiz. And we watched that in class too. I think The Wiz would be a really good movie to watch. That was one at the beginning of the semester that I read. Someone called it Afrofuturist, and I had never considered The Wiz Afrofuturist before that.
Right.
And it sort of changed the way that I thought about that movie. So I think movie-wise, I would say The Wiz.
I also think something that's important to note is if you think that you've never come across Afrofuturism before, like as a genre, you've never read anything, watched anything, you're honestly probably wrong.
Yeah, you've probably seen it.
Because I was, and I know that one of the things we mentioned was like the Black Panther movies.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so even if you've just watched that, you've interacted with Afrofuturism. So it kind of like as you get more into the class, you start to recognize like, oh, wait, this kind of categorizes, this kind of fits the aesthetic or fits the genre. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, it definitely, Afrofuturism is also a hot topic right now. It's really popular. So a lot of the things that we're engaging with when it comes to movies and music, I think, are still, because like we started the class with Janelle Monáe, right, as an Afrofuturist, and she's definitely somebody whose music sort of has that Afrofuturist theme to it. Erykah Badu, we talked about as well. So yeah, I think it just depends on, and also we also talked about Jordan Peele, right?
Yeah.
This also can be someone who I think we can.
We mentioned Beyonce in one of your PowerPoints.
Beyonce
Yes,
too.
yes.
So Beyonce
Pop
is
culture.
Yeah, Beyonce is definitely, especially with Renaissance, engaging with Afrofuturistic themes.
Right. Do you think that there's a reason why it's more like, it feels more prevalent right now, or do you think it's because you're teaching this course, or it's something that you've been studying for a while, or is there like a trend happening?
Yeah, I actually think Afrofuturism starts to sort of evolve into something bigger, right? Because it's coined in 1994 by Mark Derry in an article called Black to the Future. But we talk about in class how its origins start in the 1970s, but there are some works that have Afrofuturist themes, like W.E.B. Du Bois's The Comet from like 1920, and then Martin Delaney, I'm also blanking on the name of his text, but that's from like the 1860s. So there's still those themes that are present, but again, its original start is sort of 1970s. It's coined in the 1990s, but I think we really get to see Afrofuturism in pop culture after the Black Lives Matter movement.
Right.
Because, I don't know, there's sort of like talk in the field of African American literature about like what happens when you have like upheaval going on in society and stuff, and then what people are trying to engage with to sort of break from that stress of what's going on in the real world. And so as some sort of like, I don't know, something to like I said, like break away from the sort of stress, Afrofuturism is something that people sort of started to engage with. So I think I would say that its rise in popular culture would be around that period, maybe like 2012 to 2016. And then Black Panther is what, 2018?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That makes sense to me too, because when we talked about Afrofuturism in classes, like as a almost like, I took it as almost like a form of therapy in a way, because like it's a space for, if we're talking about feminist texts, for Black women to place themselves where you can imagine like anything has happened, like your past could be anything, your future could be anything,
right.
Whereas like typically you have a very set idea of what has happened and like what might be happening. So it makes sense to me that after like Black Lives Matter and like all of this stuff going on, that there would be a need for this like form of escapism, like you're saying.
Exactly.
And it's a way to like, it's like a positive way to envision like a different future, or like a way to see how something might play out.
Right. And a lot of the texts that we read in class sort of have this like civil rights issue that people are trying to deal with, and also themes of liberation and what freedom looks like. So that, you know, makes sense. And if we think about Black Panther and like this world of Wakanda, and we're, you know, living through Black Lives Matter movement, of course that's something people would want to engage with as that form of escapism, like you said.
Right.
And I also think it's important because it creates this space for representation without limitations of historical context. Yeah. So I think that I don't know, really contributes to the genre. It's this very like free space, I think.
For a lot of different possibilities. There's a lot that can happen with Afrofuturism. And as we see from the class, a lot that can be categorized as Afrofuturist too.
And I think it's interesting that even though I said that about not having the historical limitations, there's still like this heavy theme of culture and like remembrance. And I know The Deep, which we're reading right now, that ties all the way back to mythology, and I don't know if you kind of wanted to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, the Deep is a novella by River Solomon that's inspired by a song also called The Deep by a rap group called Clipping, and the basic mythology is that it's an underworld, mermaids underworld, sort of like utopia, and the people who live there are descendants from enslaved Africans that were thrown overboard during the Atlantic slave trade. And so there's a lot of different mythology regarding the Atlantic slave trade, and it's also how people deal with trauma, right? So it's like a response to trauma. And so a lot of people would say that the people who were thrown overboard or jumped overboard created their own world, and that they turned into mermaids, and so that's where the deep comes from. We also talked about a different sort of mythological responses to the Atlantic slave trade, about like people settling in America and then flying back to Africa. What I did not mention in class is that they didn't fly, like get wings from the backs, but flew from their feet, which I think is interesting. Cool. They had wings. So the flying African mythology is that they got wings on their feet and flew back to Africa. So there's a lot of different sort of tales that people told to deal with slavery, and I think that is really reminiscent of what we're talking about with Afrofuturism, because people are still creating these narratives to sort of deal with what's going on in society at the time.
I think this made me think of when we read Brown Girl in the Ring for our class too, and I think it's really interesting that like I'm experiencing different cultural aspects or like different spiritual beliefs that like I've never encountered before. Like Brown Girl in the Ring is all about that, and it's so like I wish that we had more diversity in the different like lit courses I've been taking and stuff. And maybe that's my fault for the specific courses I've chosen, but it's so refreshing to see something new or something that maybe hasn't been like advertised everywhere all the time. So that's just another reason I would recommend taking this course. It's just you're learning new things.
Yeah, and I guess that goes back to the different things that can be categorized as Afrofuturists, because we start with Kindred, which is sort of the time travel narrative, and then we move on to the Gilda Stories, which is a vampire novel.
It's so cool.
And so it deals with sort of the different tropes of a vampire narrative. And then we moved on to Brown Girl in the Ring, which talks about Afro-Caribbean mythology and spirituality. Then the fifth season, which is the most the Deep is the most recent, but the fifth season is like a true high fantasy narrative. And then the Deep, which also revolves around that mythology of the African enslaved mermaids. So I think like I said, it just sort of shows everything that can encompass Afrofuturism. And one author we didn't read was Nnedi Okorafor, who is more heavily on the sci-fi realm of African futurism, because she changes that narrative. She's Nigerian American, and so she creates African futurism because she says Afrofuturism doesn't allow for an entire spectrum of the African diaspora, which is something that we haven't talked about in class, but is also important to that to the themes and stuff about Afrofuturism in general. It's just a lot. There's so many different things that can be categorized as Afrofuturists.
Well, we were talking about Brown Girl in the Ring. We are the generation that read Percy Jackson in middle school. So we've read a lot of mythology, in that kind of genre. A lot of Greek mythology made like this crazy comeback. And I think it's still like there's retellings of Persephone and Hades and all that kind of stuff. So it's really interesting to see like these different forms of spirituality represented in Brown Girl in the Ring. So if you're a fan of like mythology, if you got really into Percy Jackson, it's kind of a cool thing to like be introduced to this whole new world building and these new I don't know, deities.
Yeah,
it's really interesting.
It is a lot. And then like, so Brown Girl in the Ring has the Orishas, which is the Yoruban term, but I mean called the 7 African powers, but they range from Africa to the Caribbean to southern Louisiana. And the deities are just named different things, which is interesting because we do see that with the Roman and Greek mythology, but there's still like a parallel, right, between which deities are which ones, whereas with the 7 African powers, they have.
I think it's interesting to see how it's connected to, and like, especially because that is like a spiritual aspect of like the world that maybe you don't see as frequently, but it's a part of so much.
African deities are like present in literature, right? And they have all of these different names, but they're also so present in music and art. Like Beyonce in the Hold Up video with the yellow and her bat in the water, right, is reminiscent of Oshun, one of the 7 African powers. And so those not ideas, the symbols of those different deities are present everywhere. You just have to be able to know like what they look like.
And that kind of goes back to what you were saying, Belle, about like if you think that you haven't experienced Afro-Futurism, like you probably have, and once you start looking into it, and like now that we've read Brown Girl in the Ring, I'm certain that I'm going to go out and be like, I know what that is. Like, I've seen that before.
Or even Papa Legba, right? And the character from Princess and the Frog. And we showed the picture. And I tried specifically to find a picture that was not him. And that was just Papa Legba. And instantly you guys recognized the reference.
We knew who it was.
So it's everywhere.
Do you have like course numbers for what you're teaching next semester yet, or is that up in the air?
No, I'm teaching the Women in Lit, which is Lit 3383.
Yes.
I'm not 100% sure of this section, but I can let y'all know that what section it is. But it's still Women in Lit. It's still gonna be the Women in Afro-Futurism, and will be heavily dependent on what y'all tell me in class
I'm excited
tomorrow
to talk about it.
About what sort of changes that I should make. So, but yeah, that's what I'll be teaching. It's Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 10:40.
Perfect. Well, you guys should take that class. We highly recommend it.
10 out of 10.
Oh, thanks.
And thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you so
Thank y'all so much for having me. I had so much fun.
Happy, I was gonna say Halloween. Happy Christmas. Happy
Christmas.
birthday.
Happy finals week.
Yeah, good luck, guys.
Bye.